Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a terrible neighbor sold my inherited property and claimed that it actually belonged to him. This dude insisted that he is in the right. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. A decade ago, I inherited a house from my grandparents because they had passed away. It was not the house we lived in, as we lived in a rented apartment within the city. This house was located a little way out of the city, where my father had lived with his parents and brother before they moved away, leaving only my grandparents behind. Now, my grandparents were preparing to shift to live closer to a big city before they died, so that they could get proper care, and my parents wanted to help them. However, they did not want to part with the beautiful house. At that time, I was still studying and I was in a different state too. But despite all that, they decided to give their house to me with the intention that I would move in once I had finished my studies. It had been a while since I last visited the house, so I decided to take some time off from my studies and flew back to my city. The house was truly magnificent. My grandfather had built it when he first moved to the city, and it had that charming antique style. It was a single-story house, but it had a considerable perimeter, along with a beautiful veranda and a big back garden. My grandparents had grown many vegetables there, and they even had a guava tree. I was quite young when I was handed the papers and the key to that house, and I still remember feeling so scared of all the responsibility. I flew back to the city where I'd been studying after my father left a guard in charge of taking care of the house. A year flew by quickly, and after numerous attempts, I finally secured a job placement in my own city, and about a month before the start of my internship, I decided to return and get the house back in order. However, to my utter horror, I arrived back at the house only to find a rather empty-looking plot of land. We had a beautiful garden before, with an unfamiliar-looking new house surrounded by a fence and locked gate. I immediately called my father in a panic, who in turn called the security guard. At that moment, I was also trying to ask around the neighborhood to find out what had happened. I approached my neighbor, but to my surprise, he refused to answer me. I could see people inside the house, but they completely ignored me when I rang their doorbell, and it was clear they had something to do with this situation. My father called me back to inform me that the security guard picked up his call once, but when my father inquired about this house, the guard abruptly dropped the call and switched off his phone. I asked my father to come to the city as quickly as possible before going to the police station myself. At the police station, when I tried to explain the matter to the officers, they raised their voices, telling me to stop creating a ruckus in the station and to just be calm. Realizing there was no point in arguing with them, I did my best to calm down and give them a detailed account of the situation. However, instead of filing an FIR, the police officers told me that my house was already gone and there was no use in crying over it. They even went on to suggest that my family was wealthy enough to buy me a new house in the city. I was so angry at that time that I started shouting at the officer, who in turn threatened to have me arrested if I dared to raise my voice. I demanded that he file an FIR and initiate an investigation, but the officer blatantly refused. Judging by his reaction and his defensive words, I had a gut feeling that he was involved in this case as well. When he looked like he would not be changing his mind, I told him that either he must file an FIR and start an investigation, or I would use my rich family's resources to get to the bottom of this. The officer responded with curses and dared me to do whatever I could, making it clear that he had no intention of filing an FIR for a rich brat like me. I got out of the police station and immediately made my way to one of my relatives' houses. I also called my father and told him about everything that happened. My father arrived at my maternal uncle's house in the evening, where I was staying. He reassured me that everything would be alright. My paternal uncle would be joining us the next day, and they had plans to handle everything. I shared my suspicions about the neighbor and the officer, but my father assured me that he was hiring the best advocate for our case and I did not need to worry anymore. He also advised me to start looking for an apartment in the city because cases like these could take a long time. I reached out to some of my friends who were moving to the same city for their jobs, asking them where they would be staying. The following day, my father, along with my uncles, went to meet with the advocate, while I set out to hunt for an apartment. I returned home early and was helping my aunt in the kitchen when I received a call from my father. He informed me that they were going to visit the plot where our house used to stand and asked if I wanted to come with them. Of course, I agreed, and I was surprised to find that my father had brought another group of police officers with him. As we arrived at the location where the house used to be, we spotted our neighbor loading his car with bags. I immediately informed one of the officers who stopped the neighbor and requested him to come in for an investigation. The neighbor tried to argue, but he was soon taken away for questioning. My father then dropped me off at my uncle's house before going with the police. The following day, I learned that the neighbor had denied any connection to our house and had even threatened my father, claiming that he would sue me and have me sent to jail. Our advocate conducted a thorough investigation and discovered that the reason our property had been fenced off was that it had been sold to someone else. We contacted the new owner and learned that the vacant land had been purchased from our neighbor a few months ago. Our neighbor was again called in for questioning, and this time he claimed ownership of the land and said that he could do whatever he wanted with it. Our advocate advised us to take this case to court and for me to file a lawsuit against my neighbor since the house and the property was in my name. And well, the case dragged on for a significant amount of time. What should have been an open and shut case became complex due to our neighbor's constant attempts to produce documents that proved his ownership of the land, only for these documents to be declared forged by the court. As the weeks passed during the legal battle, we also discovered that our neighbor had made a deal with the security guard shortly after we left before demolishing our house. The security guard's whereabouts were traced down after a month, and when he was called in for questioning, he initially claimed that I had signed off my property to the neighbor. However, it took another round of court proceedings to expose his lies. In summary, it was a messy case that lasted for about 6 months, which is relatively short considering how long legal matters can linger in India. Our advocate's expertise helped rush the process. In the end, all the individuals involved in this scheme were exposed, including the police officer who was fired and fined for bribery. The security guard was also fined, but our neighbor faced more severe consequences. He was not only fined a substantial amount and was supposed to give the money back, but was also sentenced to jail. Although I was relieved to see him behind bars, there was no way to bring our house back. Instead of attempting to replicate the previous house, I decided to transform the land into a plant nursery with a small house in the middle for managing the business. And by the way, ripe stars, unfortunately I had to censor a lot of personal information there, but basically what OP was trying to say is that he built this plant nursery in memory of his grandparents because they love to do gardening and all of that stuff, so basically in their memory and to honor them. Either way, if you enjoyed the title story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment because that would help me tremendously. Either way, the next one is a petty revenge story. Every year, my family likes to plan a big vacation together. It's usually my mom, my sister, my brother and his wife, my daughter, her husband and my grandbaby, and finally me and my husband. We also have open invitations to other various relatives. This year they wanted to do an all-inclusive resort in Aruba. It was settled and tickets were purchased. While I don't mind going on vacation with family, I have some qualms with the various parties who are attending. Let's start with my mom, who is up in age but has not really taken the best care of her body. So she has weight problems that have affected her ability to walk. It has also led to sleep apnea. This means that she cannot walk very far without taking tons of breaks and will fall asleep anywhere. Which is not a problem, except every time we plan an activity that requires some level of physical fitness, she discourages us from doing it and she cannot take us having fun without her. So we ended up scraping our plans and doing whatever activity she feels she can do. Then there's my brother who wants to go and cannot afford his own way. This leads him to scrounge off my mom to find a way to go. Usually, it plays itself out as he says he is going, his ticket gets bought and everything else paid for, and then my mom will have some sort of emergency where we need to help her out. We basically end up giving her close to, if not more than what it costs for my deadbeat brother to go, and then we spend the rest of the vacation paying for him and mom through meals, tickets to attractions, and anything else that tickles their fancy. Now that you have some background, let's get to the a-hole part. As we get closer to the trip, I get rumblings of my mom needing the cash for house repairs, and then my brother has to quit his job to go on the trip because the man won't let him off, and my daughter and her husband book the honeymoon suite. As all this is going down and we confirm flights, accommodations and excursions, I just nod my head and agree. The day of the trip we all head to the airport and get through security. As everyone turns left to go to their gate, me and my husband turn the opposite way. They start quizzing us where we are going and we are getting something to eat. Can we bring them some? So I just turn to them and say, "We have decided to go on a cruise out of Miami. See you guys in a couple of weeks." My daughter is irate and says, "Who is going to watch the baby while we enjoy our second honeymoon?" My mother is like, "Who's gonna pay for this for her and pay for that?" My brother just looks dumbfounded like he just lost his pet, and they all start to tell me how I am ruining their vacation and I am an a-hole and stuff. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, if I had a family like this, I would probably go crazy. Thank God I am blessed with a normal family. Either way, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story with a full conclusion and update, so please watch until the end to hear everything. So I, 47 male, have a stepson, 16 male, who for the purpose of this post we will call T. I've been married to my wife, 48 female, for 2 years and have 2 daughters, 7 female and 9 female, with my ex. Since the day T moved into my house, he has been nothing but disrespectful. I understand that change, especially change this drastic, moving, getting new siblings, a new parent, etc., is hard for a kid, but some of the stuff he does just crosses a line. For example, I transferred him to a really great private high school when he moved in because I wanted him to have the best opportunities. He always complains that he does not like his new classmates, that the school is too far away, it's 50 minutes further than his old school, which is practically nothing, and that he does not like the environment. He doesn't understand that later he will thank me for this. I would have killed for an opportunity like this at his age. Additionally, he always breaks rules we have set in place. Basically, I have asked him to surrender his phone to the living room at 9 PM to have some family time, but he says he wants to talk to his old friends. He constantly claims not to like the food his mother or I make, even when he has not tried it. His mom and I try to have a date night once or twice a week, and he always claims he is too busy to watch his stepsisters. We have asked him repeatedly for the passwords to his social media accounts, and he refuses to hand them over. I'm sick of the disrespect in my own house, so I set some boundaries. Either he starts treating me with respect and listening to me, or he can find somewhere else to live. Obviously, I would not really kick him out, but I'm hoping this scares some sense into him. My wife, however, said I took it too far and I need to apologize and tell him that I was not serious. I feel like this will undermine my authority though. Am I the a-hole? And now a little clarification by OP, so I just want to clarify a few things because they seem to be causing confusion in the comments. He did not change schools when he was 16, we had him change when he was 14, when he moved into my house, so about halfway through his first year of high school. Also, he did know about the change, we talked to him about it beforehand, he was not excited, but he did know that he would be changing schools. And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Is OP the a-hole or not? I would say, establishing boundaries is okay, but OP definitely goes way too far. You should not ask your kid for the passwords to his social media accounts. That goes way too far and definitely violates his privacy. Anyway, the first comment said, "You are the a-hole, threatening to kick him out over minor disrespect is going too far and will damage your relationship and his trust in you. Apologize sincerely, explain your frustration and speak honestly from your heart. Also, it sounds like your stepson has been uprooted from everything he knows without having much choice, despite being nearly an adult. Was his old school a bad one? The private school may be better, but one can still be highly successful with a public education. Did you talk to him before you made this choice for him? It sounds like he is pretty resentful and he may have good reason to be." Edit also wanted to add, "Your kids are your kids, your stepson is not obligated to babysit them, he is allowed to say no. Are you offering to pay him? And he is entitled to some privacy, by the way. I think demanding the passwords to his social media is kind of invasive, maybe compromise on him putting you or his mom on his friend list." Comment number 2, "You're the a-hole and oh my god, stop being such a whiner and stop clutching your pearls and interpreting every expression of dislike as disrespect." And now we got an update to the story and it reads like this. So thank you for everyone who has taken the time to comment, and thank you further to the people who have offered helpful advice. I did not come here to be vindicated, I came to find out if I was doing everything I could for my stepson, and clearly I am not. I'm going to try to fix what I've done wrong. I will offer him the option to switch back schools, although I understand that it might be too late and I'll see drastic ease up on the restrictions that have been set in place. Furthermore, I'm going to sit down and apologize. I want him to know that he is cared for and that I was wrong. Final update to the story. A little bit more than a year ago, I asked for advice on how to deal with my stepson. I was ripped to shreds in the comments, and deservedly so. Many people assumed that I took an underprivileged kid and put him in a school full of rich kids, but that could not be further from the truth. Before we married, he and his mom were very well off. We both have really well-paying jobs. The only reason he was in a public school was because the schools in our area are really great. The only reason he was switched to the private school is because it is a STEM school, and I thought that would be beneficial to him. Now anyway, on to the update. After reading the comments telling me how horrible of a stepfather I was, I felt sick. This may seem unbelievable, but I was genuinely trying to do right by him, and I was beside myself realizing that I did more harm than good. My stepson never knew his father, and I jumped at the chance to have that special father/son bond with him. I eased up on many of the restrictions I placed. He no longer has to surrender his phone, and while we still do have family time, it's about once a week instead of every night. He no longer has a bedtime, and while his mom follows him on his socials, I do not. I no longer demand his passwords to anything. The only time I've asked him to babysit is in the case of an emergency, but surprisingly now that I've stopped, he's been offering to babysit every once in a while. As for the school issue, he is still at the school we switched him to. We had many long talks about this very issue, and he ultimately decided to finish out his high school career at the school because while he missed his friends, he was able to recognize that his new school offered him the best opportunity to get into the college he really wants to attend. Since all of this, the relationship between my stepson and myself has drastically improved, and for his 17th birthday we offered to get him a car, and he and I had a really nice time picking out the right one. I've taken him to a few basketball games, which he loves, and I've enjoyed learning about the sport from him. He actually got a girlfriend and came to me for advice about dating, which is not something that would have happened before. I will say this, I'm blessed with an incredibly smart, kind, and compassionate stepson. Other kids may not have been so forgiving, and rightfully so. I urge other step-parents out there to really listen to their stepchildren instead of automatically trying to take over. You may not be as lucky as I was. And yeah guys, I gotta say, I'm happy that this story took such a positive turn. It's not what I expected, because honestly, in the first post, OP sounded so toxic and so controlling that I thought there could not be a positive outcome here. However, it's good that OP realized his mistakes and apparently now bettered himself. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So, my neighbor is on the corner lot, I live on one side of him and my friend lives to the other side of him. This guy had been a real estate agent and went through the housing crisis pretty poorly. He eventually was at a point where he was putting his trash in other people's bins because he didn't pay for his trash removal anymore. I once knocked on his door, this was still early on in his downfall, to talk about removing some nasty ivy plant that had plagued the three of us for ages, and we found finally that the root of it was in his yard, since it wasn't in my or my friend's yard from hacking all the ivy away. When he answered, he looked like a zombie who didn't care about anything, perhaps even was doing drugs. I immediately regretted it, but I brought it up anyhow briefly, but never followed up. Roommate and roommate's girlfriend moved out. I never knew the relationship, if it was a friend renting for cheap or what, but they left eventually, and for a while he was alone. Then after a while, a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. A lot of shifty people were lurking around the general area more often, and we all, people within a 2 to 3 block radius, were concerned as to why. During that time, a new person moved in with him. Then another, and I wasn't sure who lived there or who didn't. People were coming in and out all the time. A lot of these guys looked rough and scary. One time I saw a small dog they had, and one person yelled at it, "Get over here, fatty." And I asked what the dog's name was, since I figured maybe I could be friendly at least. He said Fatty. His name is legit Fatty, it wasn't a nickname or anything. I just said okay and moved on. I failed again. I did my best not to anger them. After a while, police would periodically show up in front of my house and deal with stuff. I often saw women sat down on the curb handcuffed while police were around. Selling their own body was the first thing that we found out they did. On other occasions, I would see a lot of people driving up late at night or park outside their house and wait, just wait. Eventually someone would come and there would be an exchange. Found out soon from just observing and seeing a few exchanging openly and clearly that these were drug deals. They had taken up shop selling drugs. There was an old abandoned church behind where we all lived, and I think they likely used that as a drug lab. It had already been used as once and part of it blew up. This was during a time of lots of meth labs in my city before it got cleaned up. I cannot say though if or how they used that space, but I know it was used a lot while all of this was happening. Right now the old church is being torn down and a developer is moving in to put something in its place. They have a pool too. Instead of taking care of it, they would fill it, let it turn rancid and green and drain it. This often led to mosquito swarms. We reported it to the proper people, but they did not give a crap about it. All they did was make a visit and tell them to fix the issue, because Jesus, that will work. Anyhow, as they kept draining and filling the pool, I guess they got somewhat poor again, so they came all the way to our front yard, attached a hose to our water and brought it across our front yard over their side gate and into their backyard to fill the pool. We live in California and this was during the early parts of the drought. Sadly, this was before they made such acts a federal felony offense. I wasn't home, away for an extended period of time, and my family was too afraid to do anything about that one. By the way guys, my apologies if you can maybe hear some rain on the recording, but for some reason I cannot 100% remove it. Also my apologies if my voice maybe sounds a little bit different today, but I just ate some super spicy papaya salad, so for some reason that really impacts your voice. Anyway, on 2 occasions they stole our mail, so my friend and I both installed mailboxes with a lock so it could no longer be stolen. We also both installed security cameras as well. Interestingly enough, the bad neighbors also installed cameras. I think their own scummy people were probably stealing from them too. There was this one girl named Elizabeth who kept jumping into our yard from the back area where the old church was. We have a hill and it ends in a retaining wall, so there is a gate to get down safely, as we have a fence built up to keep the dog from jumping up on the hill. She kept trying to get us to let her into our backyard and through to the front. She was a super strung out druggie, harmless though. More towards the end of their reign of terror, lots of different really nice cars started showing up. I was pretty sketched out by that of course too. Tons of random guys would show up in these nice cars and then they would get picked up and leave the cars there. In the back every so often they would bring a vehicle into the back. Came to find out they were fencing stolen cars and selling them to chop shops too for extra money. One evening I was out in the front on my phone talking with my grandma. After a few minutes I noticed some police pull up. Then I realized there was already a police vehicle parked out front, and then I saw it. A cop in full tactical gear and with a shotgun moving across the street towards my neighbor's house. He was yelling, "Put your hands up and cross the street slowly!" And I saw one of the scumbags complying and another running. I of course went inside and told my grandma in case they decided to jump the fence, come in and hold me hostage or something. Thankfully that did not happen. 2 days later I saw a huge truck stacked over the top with junk and furniture. I called my friends in excitement. I told him I think that after what happened they are gone. Turns out yes, they were evicted and the bank took back the house because of payment delinquency. Then the cops showed up the second day of clearing stuff because a couple of them came back to try and steal and salvage some stuff after being told not to trespass, and they were promptly arrested for theft and trespassing. Later found out they were filming adult movies in the house too. There was also apparently a lot of strong boxes hidden in walls, the attic and other places where I assume money and drugs were hidden. There may still be some money stashes in there somewhere for all I know. So that is my story. Now a slimy guy from the bank is renovating it and trying to sell it off. It looks great now, but I don't like him. Oh well, at least he won't stab me. Now there are tons of kids playing in the street, laughing, dogs, people leave their garage doors open again, walk around, chat together, and it feels like it did when I was much younger. For a long time they had on their own shut our community down, and now it thrives with life. I have other stories of other neighbors, but for now that will suffice. I swear I live in a decent area, but lots of nuts things have happened near me. I think it is just my curse. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.